Gold digger. The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, golden liquid spreading like spilled secrets across the pristine white tiles of my mother-in-law's estate. Victoria Ashford stood in the center of her grand ballroom, pointing at me with a manicured finger that trembled with rage. "Gold digger," she screamed, her voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "You trapped my son. You seduced him for his money. I'm Sophie Ashford, née Blackwell, 31 years old, and I'd just been trying to enjoy my 5th wedding anniversary party when my mother-in-law decided to create her own fireworks display. The 150 guests, Boston's elite, naturally, stood frozen like an audience at the world's most expensive theater performance. My husband Thomas stood beside his mother, his face pale, saying nothing. As usual. 5 years, Victoria continued, her voice rising. 5 years of watching you parade around in clothes my son bought, living in the house he pays for, contributing nothing but your pretty face. I set down my own champagne glass carefully on a nearby table. "Victoria, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Privately?" She laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Oh no, dear. Everyone here has been whispering about it for years. How the nobody from nowhere managed to snag the Ashford heir. Well, I think it's time everyone knew the truth." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Mother, please. Don't you defend her." Victoria snapped at him. "She's turned you into a fool. Where's the prenup, Sophie? The one my son surely made you sign? Show everyone here that when he divorces you, you get nothing. Show them you have no claim to the Ashford fortune." The room held its breath. I could feel every eye on me, waiting to see the nobody get put in her place by Boston royalty. I looked at Thomas, giving him one last chance to defend me, to tell his mother to stop. He looked at his shoes. "You want to see the prenup?" I asked quietly. "Yes." Victoria's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Show everyone what you're really worth." I pulled out my phone, sending a quick text. "My lawyer is actually here tonight as a guest." "Jeremy?" I called out. Jeremy Hartman emerged from the crowd, his silver hair and dark suit making him look like the legal shark he was. He carried his briefcase. He'd mentioned earlier he'd come straight from the office. "Mrs. Ashford," he nodded to me, pointedly not acknowledging Victoria. "You need the papers?" "Please," I said. He set his briefcase on the table, clicking it open with theatrical precision. The sound echoed in the silent ballroom. "The prenuptial agreement between Sophie Blackwell and Thomas Ashford," he announced, pulling out a thick document. "Executed 5 years ago, 3 days before the wedding." Victoria stepped forward eagerly. "Read it. Read the part where she gets nothing." Jeremy glanced at me. I nodded. "Article 7, Section 3, he read. "In the event of divorce, each party retains all premarital assets brought into the union." "Exactly," Victoria crowed. "And Sophie brought nothing. She was working at that little nonprofit, living in a studio apartment." "I wasn't finished," Jeremy interrupted. "Ms. Blackwell's premarital assets, as documented in Schedule A, include the Blackwell Family Trust, valued at approximately $800 million. The Martha's Vineyard estate known as Sea Haven. The Manhattan penthouse at the Perseus. A 47% stake in Blackwell Industries. Various investment portfolios totaling an additional $300 million. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Victoria's face went from triumphant to confused to ashen. That's impossible. We had her investigated. She was nobody. Her parents were teachers." "My adoptive parents were teachers," I corrected. "Beautiful, wonderful people who raised me after my biological parents died in a plane crash when I was 2. My biological parents were Robert and Catherine Blackwell." Someone in the crowd gasped. "The pharmaceutical Blackwells?" "The same," Jeremy confirmed. "Sophie's trust fund was sealed until her 25th birthday, per her parents' will. She gained full access 6 years ago, 1 year before meeting Thomas." Thomas's head snapped up, his face white. "Sophie, you never said." "You never asked," I replied. "You assumed, just like your mother, that I was after your money. Do you know how refreshing it was to meet someone who didn't know who I was? To be loved for myself, not my inheritance? At least, I thought you loved me for myself. But you work at a nonprofit," Victoria sputtered. "You live so simply." "I work at a nonprofit I founded and fully fund," I said. "We've provided free medical care to over 100,000 people. And I live simply because I don't need to broadcast my wealth. Unlike some people." Jeremy pulled out another document. "There's one more thing. This ballroom, this estate we're currently standing in, It's not actually the Ashford family estate anymore. Victoria's legs seemed to give out. She grabbed a chair. What? Thomas took out several loans against it over the past 3 years, Jeremy explained. Poor investments, I believe. Cryptocurrency? When he defaulted, the bank was going to foreclose. Sophie purchased the estate through a shell company to prevent the family from losing it. You've been living in Sophie's house for the past 18 months, Mrs. Ashford. Thomas. Victoria turned to her son, her voice barely a whisper. Is this true? Thomas couldn't look at either of us. His silence was answer enough. Oh, there's more, I said, finding my voice strengthening. The Ashford family business that's been struggling? The sudden influx of contracts last year that saved it? Those came from my connections. The medical breakthrough your pharmaceutical division just announced? Developed by researchers I funded. Why? Victoria asked, looking broken. Why would you do all this and say nothing? Because I loved your son, I said simply. And I hoped that someday his family might love me too. But instead, you spent 5 years treating me like a parasite. You made snide comments about my clothes, not knowing I was dressing down to make you comfortable. You excluded me from family decisions, called me a gold digger to anyone who'd listen, tried to convince Thomas to divorce me. I looked around the room, at all the faces that had smiled to mine while whispering behind my back. The irony, I continued, is that Thomas actually did marry for money. He just didn't know it. He met me at that charity gala, remember? The one where he was desperately trying to find investors to save his failing company? He latched onto me not because I was beautiful or charming, but because I was talking to David Chin about investment opportunities. That's not true, Thomas protested weakly. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone, scrolling to saved messages. Would you like me to read the text you sent your brother that night? Found a mark. Seems loaded, but trying to hide it. This could solve everything. His face went from pale to green. But here's the thing, I said, setting down my phone. I knew what you were doing, and I married you anyway. Because underneath the greed and the weakness, I thought there was a good man. I thought if I loved you enough, if I helped you enough, you'd become that man. Sophie, Thomas started toward me. I held up my hand. I'm done. Jeremy, please give them the other documents. Jeremy pulled out a final set of papers. Divorce papers. Already filed. And per the prenup, Sophie keeps all premarital assets, plus the estate since it's now in her name, plus several other properties acquired during the marriage with her funds. What about Thomas? Victoria asked, her voice hollow. Thomas keeps his premarital assets, Jeremy said, which, after debts are settled, amounts to approximately negative $3 million. You're leaving me with nothing? Thomas asked, incredulous. I'm leaving you with exactly what you brought to this marriage, I said. Debt, dishonesty, and a mother who convinced you that you were too good for the woman who was secretly saving your entire family from bankruptcy. I started toward the door, then paused, turning back. Oh, and Victoria? The apartment in Paris you love so much? The one you stay in every summer? That's mine too. I've been letting you use it because I thought we were family. The property manager will be in touch about your things. This is cruel, Victoria whispered. No, I said. Cruel is making your daughter-in-law eat in the kitchen during family dinners because she doesn't understand the conversation. Cruel is telling everyone at the country club that she's after your money while she's quietly paying your debts. Cruel is standing here, at our anniversary party, trying to humiliate me in front of everyone. I looked at the crowd of Boston's elite, all still frozen in place. For what it's worth, I announced, the Blackwell Foundation will continue to operate in Boston. We'll continue providing free health care, funding schools, supporting the arts. Because unlike the Ashfords, I don't believe wealth is about keeping others down. It's about lifting them up. As I walked through the ballroom, my ballroom, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Some looked ashamed, others admiring, most simply shocked. At the door, I turned back one last time. Thomas was slumped in a chair, his mother standing over him, both looking like their world had ended. Which, in a way, it had. Sophie, Thomas called out. I did love you. Maybe not at first, but I did grow to love you. I know, I said sadly. But you loved your mother's approval more. And you loved money most of all. The saddest part? If you'd just been honest with me from the beginning, I would have helped you anyway. That's the kind of person your mother convinced you was beneath you. Outside, my driver was waiting with the Bentley. Not Thomas's, mine, though I'd let him drive it for 5 years thinking it was his. As we pulled away from the estate, my phone buzzed with texts. Apologies from party guests, interview requests from journalists who'd gotten wind of the drama, and one from my adoptive mother. Saw the live stream. Proud of you for finally standing up for yourself. Dad says to come for dinner Sunday. We're having pot roast. I smiled, texting back. I'll bring dessert. Because that's what real family does. They love you whether you have 800 million or $8. They defend you when others attack. They see your worth beyond your wallet. Tomorrow, the papers would be full of the scandal. The Ashford heir who married for money and got played at his own game. The secret heiress who hid in plain sight. The mother-in-law who destroyed her own family with prejudice and pride. But tonight, I drove to my adoptive parents' modest home in Quincy, where my father would hug me and my mother would make tea, and we'd sit at their kitchen table. The same one where they'd helped me with homework, where they'd told me about my biological parents, where they'd celebrated my acceptance to Harvard and cried with me when Thomas proposed. You know, my father said later, after I'd told them everything, your biological parents would be proud. Not because you're rich, but because you tried to use that wealth to help someone who didn't deserve it. And because you were strong enough to walk away when you realized they never would. My mother added, the Ashfords spent 5 years looking down on you for being poor, not realizing you were richer than them in every way that mattered. Money, yes, but more importantly, character. As I sat there in my parents' small kitchen, eating cookies my mother had stress-baked while watching the live stream, I realized something. Victoria had screamed "gold digger" at me, trying to expose me as a fraud. Instead, she'd exposed herself and her son as the real gold diggers, people who valued money over loyalty, status over love, appearances over truth. The prenup reading had left her speechless, yes. But more than that, it had revealed the truth about what really makes someone wealthy. And by that measure, the Ashfords were bankrupt long before I ever met them. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work at my nonprofit, wearing my simple clothes and driving my Honda Civic. Because that's who I really am, not the secret heiress or the betrayed wife, but someone who understands that true wealth isn't about what you have. It's about what you give, who you love, and who loves you back. And by that measure, even after losing Thomas, I was still the richest person in Boston.